Hello, good people, and welcome to the Higher Living Podcast. Welcome to episode 17. And in studio today, as ever, we have a very, very interesting gentleman. And I think the timing of this gentleman joining us on the show is really, really appropriate because Mr. Tim Keys, who is a specialist in helping organizations to achieve their sales targets and achieve revenue growth in various markets and expanding into new markets using the latest technologies and tool sets, has joined us in studio. And it's a really good time of the year, Tim, because, guys are at the moment looking at the last few months of the fiscal year, if I can call it that. And they are now looking at ways of optimizing and getting those last few rands through the door. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be chatting to you.
Yeah. And we were talking about it briefly off air now, my introduction around the fact that most organizations at this time of the year are scrambling. We're trying to get those last few bucks in before December. We're trying to, get our strategies that we've developed in January, and all of a sudden we're in November. And some of the stuff that we've strategized around doing hasn't really been completed. So now there's a bit of a scramble before the Christmas break. That's what we find in our business. Do you find that in your customer base as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the time is fairly unique because, with COVID, I'm finding with my business that where I'm at now was pretty much where I was 2 years ago. So it's been, we had that real drop in 2020, 2021 started coming back. And what I'm finding in 2022 is we're just having to fit so much in. So it's been, some of it's planning, but part of it's just been, okay, so now we can do some good business and we're playing a little bit of catch up.
No, it's true. It's true. And, the interesting thing about it, what you do, is it's what every business aspires to do themselves, which is to grow their revenue, grow their product set, have a better access to market, have a better story in the market, and ultimately differentiate themselves in the market, which is easier said than done. But before we get into that, Mr. Keys, give us a bit of an appreciation for who Mr. Tim Keys is and how your journey started, and how you actually found your passion, which is, helping organizations to achieve their objectives.
Yeah, so I started out as an English teacher and then did that for 5 or 6 years. Then moved into adult training. So, I've always been a teacher at heart and I always will be. But, moving into adult training was quite a shift. I did Word and Excel and PowerPoint, that kind of applications training. And then one day I was at Microsoft and I heard two people talking about the fact they were looking for a sales trainer. So I walked up to them and I said, well, I know sales and I know licensing, can I do it? And they said, well, we'll have to send you to training. They sent me to Amsterdam for 2 weeks so that I could be, learn the solution selling for partners, and did that for 8 years. So 2000 to 2008, I traveled around the world doing sales training for Microsoft. I went to 44 different countries in that time. And then 2008, I got an email saying, thank you very much. We're going online with this training. And I went from having 6 months worth of business to having to reinvent the institute.
This is your organization, the Sales Institute.
Yes, so I founded the Sales Institute. I had a company called SoftSource, which did the billing of Microsoft. And then in 2008, I became trading as the Sales Institute. So I took everything I'd learned in the 8 years of working with Microsoft and I adapted that into my own methodology. And then expanded to different size organizations. Right now, I still like the IT world. I'm still very comfortable in software as a service and IT companies, but I work all over the place. Manufacturing, financial services, small to medium, large. Very passionate, though, about startups and growing businesses. I'm very passionate about entrepreneurial skills. So, yeah, it's been a great journey for the last few years.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It's so interesting because I've also had a few, I don't want to say failed businesses, but a few learnings, business learnings over the course of my career. And what I find is that the ability for an entrepreneur to understand, their value that they bring to the market and position that is one thing. But the ability for a customer to recognize that value and tie that value to a business need that they have and be willing to pay money for that is something very different.
Yeah.
And often people start out as entrepreneurs, and again, I can relate to this from back in the days. It's very difficult for entrepreneurs to articulate the story of value to their clients. And if we start at the bottom end, is that something that you find when you deal with smaller businesses, is that their concept of value proposition and pitch of the value proposition is sometimes is the area that they need work on?
So what you often find, especially with people who start businesses because they're good at something. So I worked with something called Microsoft BizPark, which was an incubation program where I was the sales and marketing specialist, helping startups who built applications on Microsoft technology. And the biggest thing that they did was they said, well, I'm really good at this. I've got this great idea. They built an application and they figured as long as it was on the internet, people will come flocking to get the product. And two things happened. One, they didn't know how to sell it. And two, they often get suckered by people who sell marketing services. So it's a big thing that I find is there are a lot of people who claim you don't need to physically sell if you do the marketing well, which is valid. But then, these poor guys spend a whole lot of money for somebody who promises, search engine optimization and, and social media, and people still don't come flooding in. And even if they get queries, they just don't know how to close it for that exact reason. They know why they love the product, but they get stuck into the detail of it. And their ability to communicate business value, it's a really big mismatch. The other interesting thing is they struggle to translate what they know about their product and what the value is into a system that can be replicated. So what I find where I work with companies, they're very good at getting to a certain point. So they grow organically for a little while, and then now they have to take the next step and run a business, and they just don't know how to take that next step and build out the sales team. And that's where the biggest gap comes.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's so many points there that I could latch on to. The first is it is just the nature of being a startup, to be in a space where you're good at something, where you've got a concept and you've got this ambition to grow this out, and you've got a little bit of cash flow in most cases, sometimes funded or self-funded, and you find yourself in the space where now you have to sell. What would be your advice? Would it be best to find and to bring it, because when you're thinking about building out a team initially as a startup, is it favorable to you for you to partner with someone who knows how to sell? Because inherently some people are just not good at selling. They don't have the personality, they don't have the characteristics of being a salesperson. Now my question there is that a fair thing to say? And how should organizations that are at the smaller end look at overcoming that?
Okay, so the first thing is there's a lovely company I work with here in Cape Town. And when he established the business, he had great advice. He says, when you have especially two partners, have one who's technical and one who can sell. I thought that was great advice, where having a director who exclusively focuses on the sales component, because again, what happens is a founder or a business owner or a manager, you end up spending so much time putting out fires. And then you put off the hard yards of doing the selling. So I do believe, if possible, you want to have somebody you can trust who's going to focus on selling, if you can afford that. There's another interesting dynamic here is I believe that the owners of businesses like yourself, you know how to communicate your value. And
Mm,
so, if anything, to grow the business from the beginning, I would be happier if you spend more time doing strategy and sales and then outsource some of the other functions that a CEO or an MD would have to do,
mm.
like the more admin related or ops. And then you get to a certain point where you have to hand it over because, once you get to a certain size, there's no way you can do that alone anymore. And then you have to take that messaging and turn it into a system that works and then bring in highly talented people to take it forward. The big thing for me, though, is there has to be a system. This is the big mistake. We bring people on board. We say, here's a laptop, off you go and sell. Whereas I believe if you have a system, you can then onboard new people far more easily, and it's a lot easier to sell.
Yeah, and when you say a system, what do you practically mean?
So the biggest thing for me is number one, very clear messaging. What is your value proposition? Who's your customer? What is your messaging? How do you go to market? All of that needs to be very, very clear. And then have a series of support tools. Because the one thing about sales right now is it's become multi-channel. The days of the super salesperson who cold calls themselves to death and goes and makes appointment, that's long gone. The
Yeah.
the successful salespeople right now are able to combine telephone appointments, social selling, using LinkedIn, for example, video, online, like what we're doing. It's a much more multidisciplinary approach and leveraging more channels to customer. Now, to do that, marketing needs to support you, and the people need to have the tools available. So the classic example of this who does it brilliantly is IBM, where you join IBM, you're given a repository. So they create a LinkedIn account for you. You go onto a site and they run themes. Then all you have to do is copy and paste and follow a series of guidelines for your social selling. And they
Okay.
provide you with support on your cold calling scripts, your emailing scripts. We the Americans call this a playbook. But I believe there should be a strong playbook that, regardless of who comes in, you have the safety net of what good sales looks like.
Mm, mm. And do you think that a sales team and salespeople should be recruited directly for that job and should be assessed against their personality and technical sales competence? Because often we find that people get promoted into sales job. You're doing a good job in an operational space, and now they promote you into sales, which sometimes also has the adverse effect.
Yeah, this is where my research is a little different to what a lot of people tell you. So
Mm,
a lot of people talk about, this ridiculous concept of sell ice to an Eskimo. That's
mm,
not what sales is all about. The research says that the top performing salespeople, again, are entrepreneurial in nature. So they have the ability to see opportunities, have a look at a customer as if it's their own, figure out what's going wrong, and then making a recommendation on how to fix the problem. So to me, there are two really good types of salespeople. The one person who's looking at helping solve your problem as the customer. So they think business and then they bring to bear all the resources to enable what we call business improvement. And then the other one, which is one of my favorites, it is possible to teach somebody who has high technological efficiency, who's very good technically, and teach them how to apply something called consultative selling, which is how do you communicate value and not just focus on the technology. So I
mm.
think hiring either of those people really works, but you have to be very careful who you hire. We tend to hire for experience, for their interpersonal skills, and actually the research says that those aren't the differentiators. It's more about understanding how business works, and as I said, translating technology understanding into how that improves the business.
And do you find, I mean, we're having very much a technology conversation now, but are these principles and the playbook and then these sort of things applicable to other industries as well? I mean, is it a horses for courses, or is it is something that is quite IT focused?
I would say it's IT focused. So the consultative selling Where I train it a lot is in any organization where there's a level of complexity. So whether it's financial services, manufacturing, IT, whatever it is, if there's a layer of complexity that requires technology understanding or technical understanding, where you're a specialist, that's where consultative works. And then in my experience, this other kind of salesperson who understands business, that translates everywhere. Of course, business to consumer is a little different, but any business to business environment, it's not about you trying to sell me something. And this is where guys get it wrong. They chase targets like crazy, and they pester the customers and they bully them. Where in reality, the paradox is if I help you be successful, you're going to want to give me more money. So this logic of what I call business improvement is fundamental to successful sales. And the good news is you can teach this to youngsters. I met a guy the other day, man, he was 19 years old, and he's probably one of the most promising youngsters I've seen in terms of his ability to understand how business works. And he's still learning it, but you can just see he's got what it takes because he's thinking in the right way.
And two things. The first thing is often the leadership culture of some organizations push down these sales targets, and often some of these sales targets are realistic because they marry back to what the board's expectations are. So what that does is it puts pressure on the sales team, and then the sales team, to meet these targets or to try and meet these targets, have to behave in questionable ways, and they have to nag the customer and irritate the customer and do all sorts of things to try and meet these targets, which end up getting the wrong result in the end. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the ability for conversation between two people, technical person in their field, to have a conversation with a client regarding a requirement or a business problem that they're having, or an opportunity even for that matter. And for that conversation to be valuable and insightful for the client, gives the client a confidence that these people will perhaps be able to help them through this process, which makes the customer more amenable to pulling the requirement for their product or service, opposed to us ramming it down their throat.
So I don't for 1 minute want to give the impression that I don't believe, in targets and forecasts and pipelines. Yes, all of that's important. I just believe that if you do enough of the right activities and you are having the conversations you're talking about, inevitably you will make the sales targets. So I believe in bottom-up forecasting or bottom-up planning, where you have a look at what's possible, what audience is available, what customers need my products, and then have a look at where are we going to have the conversations. So it's still target driven. My problem, though, is you have to be so careful of what you're measuring. There's a classic story, I don't know if you heard this one, of McDonald's, where they started measuring how long people were waiting at that window. And what started happening is people were not putting like the tomato in or the lettuce in because they were chasing the number, because they wanted to reduce the time. And that to me is unhelpful. So if you can measure good quality conversations, and you still need to learn the sales skills of, closing the sale, etc. But if the focus is on the right things, you will grow sales. That's the ultimate paradox. If you do enough of the right things, help enough customers, you will make money.
Yeah, true. And I guess, and I've seen this in my business as well. I guess that first interaction with the customer is such a critical interaction, and it's often the interaction where the interaction typically becomes an I, we, my conversation, where it's everything about what you're trying to sell this client, whether it be a system or whether it be a product or whatever it may be. And often I've seen in presentations that haven't gone well, that the client becomes very disengaged because 90% of the conversation is around you talking about yourself or your product or whatever. And that last 10 minutes or 5 minutes where there's actually that interaction with the client about what's going on in their world and trying to marry the solution or the product to what's going on in their world is actually the insightful part. But it's now only given you the last 5 or 10 minutes, which means that you run out of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, we call it the needy salesperson syndrome. Yeah, so where I got that from is I went to buy a TV one day and I walked in and I said to the lady, I need a TV. And she said, please buy from me. I need to feed my family. Yeah, yeah, and that's again the wrong attitude to have. And this navel gazing that businesses have, they believe that everybody just wants your product. That's not how it works. You have to convince them that there's a real business need. The other thing that's interesting, Sean, talking about how you communicate this, the research today says that the way that you prospect has to be this kind of sharing of information much earlier than before. So up until now, or the last few years, people have relied on that first appointment to communicate value. I read a very interesting study the other day that executives, especially in larger organizations, will get involved in a sales deal at the beginning and at the end. They don't get involved in the middle. So they'll identify a need. They'll go to the relevant person who owns that and said, I want you to find out about this topic. And then once that person's done all the due diligence, they'll come in again and check the price. Now, a lot of salespeople, because they're so focused on, yes, it's me and this is what my company does, they're not getting the attention of the executives. So I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, for example. And a lot of executives spend time on LinkedIn. The way you communicate to execs and building out how I can help you, how I can help you with your business needs, what the trends are. This has to happen long before that first call. It's got to happen much earlier now. So things like what you're doing here with podcasts and sharing of information and webcasts and books and all of that becomes incredibly important, where you take customers on this journey of identifying what they really need.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes the thing we don't think about is and many people don't think about is the sale is not just getting the client to sign the contract and award you the piece of work and getting paid for it, but the sale cycle also is the beginning of building a long-term relationship. And when you adopt that approach of partnering with your clients to solve their business problems, you become that preferred partner or trusted partner, if I can use that word, then you don't have to sell anymore. It's not a case of selling. It's a case of assisting and helping, and helping your client close these gaps. And it's also about delivery at the end of the day. I mean, I think something that I've also seen in the market is that sales teams are sometimes quite disjointed. So the sales team would come and get the job done and then hand over to the delivery team, and the delivery team might not meet the requirements of what was sold on the sales side. And I've even heard people on projects say things like, these sales people sold you, they sell you down the river kind of thing, So there needs to be a very close integration between marketing, sales, delivery. I mean, it all needs to work together in a system. And I mean, that's now in context to the bigger organizations, in context to the smaller organizations. It's even more important to ensure that you can actually deliver.
Yeah, I agree with that. And people have got very long memories. If you do something that is self-centered, and you manipulate someone or get them to buy something that they don't want or that they regret buying, that lives for a heck of a long time. Whereas if you deliver real value throughout the process, and I think small to medium organizations, I think they appreciate this even more, is where they see real benefit of working with you, they will work with you far longer term. I've got customers, there's one here in Cape Town. I've been dealing with them for at least 10 years. It's such a great relationship. Every now and then I go in, every year I do a strategy. Every time they bring in new people, I train up their sales teams. It's such a lovely relationship because they trust me and they know that I have their interests at heart. And, if you have these long-term relationships, you can make so much more predictable revenue than constantly having to go and find new customers.
So true, so true. And breaking into new clients is very difficult. Not that it was ever easy, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. The nature of competition, the nature of the wallet getting smaller. There's a number of factors, but it is getting increasingly more challenging
Yeah, and they're
to.
working from home as well, which
Yeah,
makes it even
exactly.
more, there are a lot of people who aren't going back to work. So finding the right people now used to be telephone calls. You look at the Poppy Act and you have a look at people working from home.
Mm, mm.
Prospecting isn't as easy as it used to be.
Back in the day, what I used to do to up my pipeline and my sales was I would go to my clients and hang out at the watering hole, which was the coffee bar or the coffee station, and at some point everyone would make their way down there to grab a coffee or a tea or a bite, and that's when you'd use that opportunity to coincidentally bump into somebody on purpose
Mm.
and spark a conversation. But to your point about working from home, the digital work has removed that element of that human touch and that element of being able to do those type of things. So now you have to be even more deliberate and even more structured and even more streamlined in terms of the way you position yourself with these clients.
Agreed. And that brings us to more conversations. The first one being your marketing is as much more important now. So the quality of your website that
Mm,
allows people to go on learning journeys. A really good website to have a look at that I always refer to is vauto.com, which
yes.
takes you on these incredible learning journeys that you can understand what the product can do. So I think we need to invest there. And then the second part, which I don't think we're doing well enough yet, is every interaction now becomes gold. You know, Northwest Airlines or Scandinavian Airlines, they spoke about moment of truth. If you get a lead that comes in, you want to treat that with absolute care, and respond quickly and deliver incredible customer experience because, you're not getting, even I see it with me, I'm not getting as many queries as I used to. So the queries I do get, I need to make sure that I look after them. The customers I already have, I need to also not take them for granted in any way and make sure that it's always a good experience and that I'm delivering value.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So your business at the moment, how big is your business?
So in terms of people, the way it works is we've got 4 or 5 staff members who work together.
Okay.
And then if I need other facilitators, I've built a pool of facilitators over the years. Like I have somebody in Johannesburg, David. We went to school together. So
Okay.
we've worked together for many, many years. And they've, because we work so closely, they know how I think and what we train. So anytime that I need to scale the business, I then have 4 or 5 other really good facilitators who I use on an ad hoc basis. Give
Yeah.
you an example, we did a project last month. In 6 weeks, we had to deliver 63, or sorry, I lie, 120 sessions of 3 hours each.
Okay.
So then I had
Okay.
all
Okay.
hands on deck. So we're a lean and mean company. So it's myself plus one person who manages my finances, and then 2 full-time facilitators. And then on top of that, I partner with a lot of people. I do believe in that partnering, though. Is lesson I learned about running my business is you can't do it all alone. So either
Right.
you're going to have to hire those skills, or you need to be comfortable sharing your toys and sharing margin. And the way I found how to scale my business is to work with partners who can deliver value in areas that I can't, like in the marketing area that I don't specialize in.
Absolutely. I mean, collaboration is the name of the game. We see it not only in business, but we see it in music, we see it in movies, we see it, this collaboration. Without collaboration, one is so limited to the bandwidth, to the intellectual property, to their, that is confined within their own ecosystem. But the minute you share ecosystems, you're able to do so much more. I mean,
Yeah.
also in my business, collaboration has taken us to new heights. And also it's great to because some of these partnerships also push the thinking of what you believe might be possible, and it also gets you to learn about what you're not typically good at. What I did want to ask you though, do you find at this time of the year that you're slightly more busy than other sides, or is it your business seasonal?
This is my season.
This is your season.
Yeah, from September to November, I probably do roughly 60% of my business. Cape Town's a weird place. I do a lot of work in Johannesburg, but in Cape Town, for some reason, I get very quiet during our winter here. And then everybody wakes up now, and then they want it done by end of the, middle of December. And then the other time that gets very, very busy is February to March, because now that's just before a lot of the year ends and where people are doing budgets. So the summer months, I get a lot of training work, and then I get a lot more writing work and building courses and things during the winter months. So it's definitely seasonal, especially now. This time of the year, I'm always really, really busy.
Where do you see the sales, I mean, your content and your business and the sales journey going for you and your clients? Do you see there being more digital evolution? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about this year. On the one hand, I'm embracing digital. I'll explain why now. On the other, what I've realized this year, now that we've opened up again and people want you back in a class, is there is a place for an incredibly skilled facilitator. Someone who can bring things out of people, who can consult at the same time as train, who can deliver real value, not just train a manual. So what I found is I've actually extended that part of the business again, where I cut down on my number of facilitators, and now the need is just growing again of having quality facilitators. What has happened though is a lot of it is now being done virtually. So 80% of my business right now is being done through Teams. Whereas before it was classroom. Now this month it's going to drop to about 70, but it's still 70-30. So what I do is I run the program over a series of weeks. And what I find is you do an hour and a half a week, then people have to do homework. And I found that gets them much deeper into the content. And you can do so much more with this extended course. So I have certainly embraced virtual instructor-led. And then where I think the future is going, I'm trying to understand this concept of the metaverse, because I'm seeing some incredible abilities to using artificial intelligence on how to assess skills and build learning material at a much more affordable rate than having to record online learning. So, having an avatar where you build the copy and the avatar takes on the personality versus having to spend 2 days in a recording studio. I'm incredibly excited about that. And then I saw something the other day.
Sorry, Tim, have you started on that process already?
Only very, very early days.
Okay,
I'm
that's
really
very
trying
exciting.
to figure it out. Yeah, I want to. The other thing I saw, which I just wanted to mention, this was incredible. With artificial intelligence, the issue's always been with online is I can only give you multiple choice questions, or true and false. It's very difficult to assess ability online. And I saw something the other day with artificial intelligence where one of my courses is presentation skills. And this managed to take a video of a person and analyze tone, voice, pace, clarity, body language, and actually score the person looking at the video. And I thought, wow, that's where this hybrid model is going to come in. As technology makes the assessment more effective and you can build customized learning paths, I think this hybrid model is going to be incredibly exciting.
It is. I was part of an assessment of a medical technology recently, and it was also using AI, and it is just mind-blowing how accurate the technology is and how accurate the AI is in terms of reading body language, in terms of reading body, facial twitches and all sorts of things,
Mm.
and actually coming out with an assessment that is spot on. So it is, and then providing the feedback in a manner where the person can make decisions regarding their health in real time, quickly and effectively. So without going to a GP, without going to a doctor, you can really start to make a difference.
Wow, that's incredible. The other thing with learning is that you need to make them in smaller chunks now. We're
Yeah.
just finding people don't have the time, sometimes don't have the inclination of sitting in a classroom for 2 days, and actually prefer having smaller units. And like we're building a course now, which is 10 minutes a day over 6 months. So I
Yeah.
think that's also something that's changing, is that people want needs-based learning. They want to source multiple references and they want to do it in their own time. So I'm very excited. I want to do this as my priority for next year, is to research, educational technology solutions, but the real cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that makes learning accessible on any platform
Mm,
for people as they wish to learn.
yeah.
And as you said, learning nowadays, we don't realize, but I mean, things like YouTube and all of these things are great learning platforms.
Mm.
It's just, how do you create the experience and the environment that suits your business. So yeah, that's very interesting, Tim, and I think there's definitely something there. Do you find that would be a differentiator in the market for yourselves?
I think definitely there's a whole new way of how you market and sell that. And I think people appreciate when you don't take the sales team out of out of the office for too long, because ultimately you want them to sell. The other area that I believe is valid is on the job learning. How do you support that? So I'm a
Yeah,
very big fan of coaching. So I want to have a look at how can we build tools that allow people to coach over an extended time. Like if they have a situation, can they reference some kind of advice on that topic? Or how do you create more long-term skills development rather
yeah.
than formal classroom training? So these are all things I'll mull over when I go on holiday.
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's also those things out there like, NLP and deep search and those type of
Mm,
things where, I was at one point in my career also in the learning environment, and I used to implement LMSs, learning management systems.
mm.
And now if you look at where the LMS market has gone around AI-powered LMSs, that, has the ability to not only give you a learning path, but assess you and create new material for you as you need it, that is customized for you.
Wow.
It's
Yo, okay.
incredible. But I mean, I think every business owner goes through this journey where we are constantly evolving. And this time of the year is fantastic for that, especially this December break period that most have, is a great time for introspection, and a great time to not really only revisit how good the year was on numbers, but to look at the new opportunities that we need to implement in the new year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good time to think about what you want to do for for the new year, because that's the other thing. The world has moved on, and I'm not sure we've adapted as quickly as we like to think.
Mm,
I was doing a course the other day on hybrid leadership, and there are a whole lot of dynamics that have been brought about from work at home. So
yeah,
how do we coach our team? How
yeah,
do we manage our team? So I think we need to be looking at, are we dealing with our customers in the right way? Are the current sales approaches still the most effective? Where
yeah.
should we be adapting? Because, if you stand still, it's not even a case of going backwards. If you stand
No,
still, you fall behind. It's moving so quickly.
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Time runs out so quickly on the show. We've got a couple of minutes left. And I just wanted to sort of pick your brain around this, because I know a lot of our viewers out there and a lot of our listeners, sorry to use the right word, um, they are either have a side hustle, or they are entrepreneurs, or they are business owners, or they are, in the startup phase, and some of them are in major corporates, and they're leading sales teams. And sometimes it's not about reinventing by the wheel, but just having the basics in place when you're trying to
Mm.
sell. For you, Tim, what would the basics be? What was the foundation of being able to market and sell your business and your product better?
The biggest thing for me is having the right attitude, being customer focused.
Yeah,
Knowing your messaging, knowing how you help customers, A big skill, which I think people underestimate, is the ability to ask questions and listen. So
Yeah.
when you get to see people, is ask a question and then shut up. Get to understand their dreams, where they want to go, where their challenges are, what they need to improve, and then give them a solution that delivers value. Those are the basics. But to me, it really comes down to empathy and listening skills. If you get that part right, a lot of the rest falls into place.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't know, for lack of a better word, don't bullshit your clients.
Yeah.
Because often we find ourselves in a space where we're in a meeting and a client asks a question, and then out of the pressure of obligation, we feel like we should be the experts and we need to give an answer. And often that is something that draws back on the credibility.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And then a piece of advice for owners of businesses and sales managers is build the system. There's definitely a good, and a lot of people allow these, these salespeople to do all sorts of wrong behaviors. To me, there's got to be the right way to sell, the right messaging, the right approach, the right reports. Everything needs to be structured, and then get people who, the right people on the bus, who will embrace the method that works. Don't leave salespeople to their own devices. Doesn't work like that anymore. The owner of the business understand what works. They understand the value. You understand the messaging, and then build a system that you can replicate. And then the big thing for me then is onboarding. When you bring people on, they must buy into the culture immediately. You just don't want lone wolves, that are causing mayhem because they want to do their own thing and just leave me alone. To me, successful sales is about building the right systems.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the word playbook earlier, and if you take that reference to sport, when they've got a rugby playbook, they know exactly in this case, when the ball goes to certain areas and the team does certain things or the opposition does certain things, there's a specific mapped out plan of action that they have, and it should be exactly the same thing, which is what I think you were alluding to earlier around the playbook, and having that defined so that you know exactly, okay, my customer is unresponsive at the moment, I can't get hold of them, what do I do next?
Yeah.
I can't close the deal, they're just not giving me the approval, what do I do next? And also when to close the door. Often, I know as business, or especially aspiring business owners, they're afraid to close that door on a bad sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr.
I
Keys,
agree.
it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I can't believe time has gone by so quickly, as it always does on the show. I'm going to link your website and your details down below. I think there's many people that should get in touch with you to help you just to transform the way and the predictability of their sales cycles. So once again, thank you for being on the Higher Living podcast. It's been our absolute privilege to have you on.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And all the best to you and your peak period. And we'll chat to you again soon.
Same to you. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, good people. Just remember, if you do one thing only, and that's stay inspired. Cheers.